world, and welcome back to the Simple Sports Podcast. Today's episode number 17, Week 7 NFL preview. We picked the game on Thursday night between the Giants and the Eagles, plus 3.5 on the Giants. Take that all the way. Thought they were actually going to pull up the win. They should have, but Evan Ingram, of course, who, if you were listening to the podcast, I told you to stay away from in Draftkings, and sure enough, that turned out to be the right decision. Carson Wentz is your captain, probably the right decision. It wasn't a pretty game by any means, and we'll talk about it here briefly. It wasn't a pretty game. I feel bad for Daniel Jones in the regard that, you know, he did enough to win that football game. All the stuff they done all the way up to that point, the fumble on the last drive and all that. Okay, that's fine. Like, you can criticize him for that, but he threw what should have been a game-sealing pass to Evan Ingram, and it just goes right through his hands. And as soon as it happened, the Eagles had already grabbed all the momentum. All they had to do was complete that pass, and they would have quelled anything to that point. And instead, like I said, Evan Ingram drops a pass, goes right through his hands, and as soon as it happens, you just know that they are going to lose. They punt the ball off to the Eagles, and sure enough, they march right down the field, get a few penalties, and despite the penalty on themselves, the face mask, they're able to get the touchdown. Carson Wentz to Boston Scott, incredible throw after struggling for a lot of the night. I thought the Giants played well. Again, probably should have won that game. I feel bad for Daniel Jones, especially when a guy does enough to win a game and he still gets screwed like the way Daniel Jones did. It just sucks. But they get the cover, so no harm, no foul on our end. I thought it was an ugly game, but it was a very entertaining game. Carson Wentz struggled early, finished it off late. Daniel Jones had the big, long 80-yard run. Probably should have gotten the end zone. Definitely should have gotten the end zone. I think he was just, he was trying to go out of his body and like trying to run. Like he wasn't really that confident in it. You could tell because he's trying to speed up, even though he's leaving everyone on the field. Like, dude, if you just run, you're going to score. And he's trying to compensate and ends up overcompensating, getting ahead of himself, stumbling over his feet, and unfortunately, or fortunately, I should say, they end up getting a touchdown anyway. But again, ultimately, feel bad for Daniel Jones, feel bad for the Giants, but that's as much as I want to talk about two bad football teams. Because like I said, it wasn't that great of a game. Neither team is really going to amount to much this year. Maybe the Eagles can bounce back with some of their guys come back from injury, although they've got Lane Johnson back. He's hurt. They got Sean Jackson back. He's hurt. So it's not looking very good for either team. The Eagles have a little bit of hope, a little bit of life. They're cleaning the first place for the moment. We'll see what happens with the Cowboys in Washington on Sunday. But for now, they hold first place. So today, what I want to talk about is, of course, our picks for Sunday's games, tomorrow's games. A little late on the upload today. Had some stuff I had to get knocked out, but we are here nonetheless. Guys, we are hitting at over 60% on the year. If you are not taking my picks, you are missing out on making some money. 60% is pretty good. We're close to about 64% on picks this year. Now, that is picking every game against the spread. Every single game we pick against the spread. I personally only bet. There's usually 2 or 3 that I won't bet. I'll put a little something on every game. I typically will tell you which games that I'm not betting. But if I bring the game up on here, which I bring them all up, for the most part, I bet on them. So 64%, I'll take it. And like I said, if you're following our picks, you should be making some cash. So let's make some cash. All right, so let's start with the Browns at the Bengals. So I have the Browns -3 at the Bengals. The question I found myself asking once these last couple of weeks settled in is, are the Browns the best bad football team in football, or are they the worst good team in football? And by that, I mean this. We have to acknowledge that they are 4-2. In case you haven't noticed, a lot of the bad teams have bad records, and the good teams have, there's no good teams with a bad record. That's just the way it is, and the reason is, uh, teams that are supposed to win the games they're supposed to win tend to do so. The Colts, the Cowboys, the Bengals. These are the teams that the Browns have beaten. And so it's hard for me to sit here and say, well, they're such a bad football team when they have beaten the teams that they're supposed to beat. And then the teams that they have lost to in the Ravens and Steelers, yes, were massive blowouts, and I get that. But the fact remains, they did lose to two Super Bowl contending teams, perhaps. And so, to me, all this panic. Listen, does Baker need to play better? Absolutely. Is he on the brink of losing his job, depending on especially how this game goes? Absolutely. You That's something you have to pay attention to. How does Baker Mayfield feel physically? We know he's banged up with the rib injuries, got beat up last week against Pittsburgh. So how does he feel physically? Is he going to be good enough to push through and perform in such a way? Because this is an important game for Baker. This is an important game for the Browns as a whole. But for Baker specifically, for one, you can't lose to the Bengals. Okay, you already had a closer than it should have been game against the Bengals this year, 35-30, and Joe Burrow, for all intents and purposes, outplayed you in just a head-to-head, straight-up matchup. So this Bengals team is probably going to be top 3, top 5 in the draft. You can't lose to this team, especially when you're a team trying to get over the hump, erase this sort of stigma and stench around the Browns not being a winning franchise, get to a respectable 5-2 in competition for the division, in competition for a playoff spot. You cannot lose to the Bengals. It's one of the many problems that I had with teams like the Titans, especially in the years with Mariota, where they would be in competition. I'll never forget the key moment, oddly enough, up against the Steelers, where they had an opportunity to take over the 1 seed the last time they made the playoffs before last year. They had an opportunity to take over the 1 seed by beating the Pittsburgh Steelers, and instead they got shellacked. I think the score was like 42-12 or 16 or something like that. I don't know. It wasn't a very close game. Thursday Night Football against the Steelers, and they laid an egg. And that's when I knew, well, this just isn't a very good football team. They're not of that caliber. Could they make the playoffs? Yeah, and they ended up making the playoffs and winning a playoff game. So that's actually how I look at the Browns right now, where it's like, you can't. Now, Pittsburgh wasn't a bad team, but to me, it signified a moment where it's like, okay, you're 5. I think the Titans were 5-3, maybe. Actually, it might have been a little bit later in the season. I think they were 7-3 actually, and the Steelers were 8-2, something to that effect. And if they would have won the game, they would have had the head-to-head matchup and thus taken the 1 seed. This is what it feels like now. Again, different circumstances, different things to play for, in that it's the Bengals, but it's sort of the same feeling where it's like, if you really want to be one of those teams, the thing that you can't do is lose to the Bengals. And maybe that disqualifies them in and of itself, in that that's how low, so to speak, we have to go in terms of, the Browns being a good football team. The other thing for Baker Mayfield is he can't look bad against Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow, number 1 pick, bad franchise, surrounded by nothing, versus Baker Mayfield, the number 1 pick, surrounded by what should be a pretty good defense if they can get a healthy back end, and all of these offensive weapons that the Browns have given to Baker Mayfield. You just can't come out and look bad versus a rookie who is playing behind a patchwork offensive line and really a patchwork organization. You just can't have it happen for Baker Mayfield. And just for the franchise, it's also important because a few reasons. One, when's the last time the Browns were 5-2? I don't know, but I can assure you it's been a long time. The other thing is, you don't want to lose Odell or really any of your talented players, right? You don't want Landry requesting a trade or Odell requesting a trade or whoever else you want to throw in the mix. And the longer you continue to not play well if you're Baker Mayfield, if you continue to not win games as a Browns organization as a whole, guys like Odell Beckham are going to be getting out of there. And this is going to be a good opportunity to ensure that Odell Beckham stays at least through this year. Is if you can come out this week and produce against a bad football team. Let's face it, as much as the Bengals fight and do all that good stuff, they're not a good football team as a whole. Not yet. You don't want to lose Odell. You don't want to lose Jarvis. You don't want to lose anyone else on that team because they think that they could do better elsewhere. And so you got to come out and beat the Bengals. I spent a long time on the Bengals there, but ultimately, like I said, Browns -3 at the Bengals. Cowboys +1 at Washington. It is an embarrassing day to be a Dallas Cowboys fan that they are a pick'em game against a team that doesn't even have a name. Washington. A bad football team on both sides. I can't even confidently believe that Cowboys will look any better this week than they have in the last couple of weeks because what do I have to base it on? The only thing that was going well for them was their quarterback. And to me, even what he was doing was a little bit fudged due to the nature of how their games went in terms of them having to come back from huge deficits. So it's been a long fall from grace in some people's eyes for the Cowboys because they had such high expectations. If you listen to the Simple Sports podcast, I told you before the season started this team wouldn't be any good. It's got nothing to do with Dak Prescott's injury because they were not good before then. And I don't think they'll continue to be good. But can I really go against them against this Washington team who one quarterback came from a different team just last year. So we know what he is in Kyle Allen. Another team was just drafted, or another guy was just drafted in Dwayne Haskins and has already been put on the bench. And then the other guy has a leg that is basically made out of cartilage. And I wish him all the best, and Alex Smith. So they don't have a quarterback that is settled in Washington. There's no reason that the Cowboys shouldn't win this football game. So I'll take the Cowboys +1 at Washington. The Lions +2.5 at the Falcons. This one is interesting because the Falcons may have played their best game last week. Maybe they just played some inspired football against a really bad team, and just they just got the mojo going a little bit. They're not a good football team, and the Lions are still quietly in the playoff mix. They need to win this week in order to keep that afloat, and a win this week would be huge, especially even though it's against a team that's not doing very well. They are an NFC opponent, and thus this will be a huge win for the Falcons, or excuse me, for the Lions. I like the Lions +2.5. Falcons are far more explosive offensively, but again, the defense is the problem with Atlanta. And while the Lions aren't exactly excellent on offense, the Falcons will help contribute to making them look the part. I think the Lions win this one. +2.5, pretty easy, I think, for the Lions. Panthers +7 at the Saints. I've been dead wrong about two teams this year, and I will freely admit that I've been dead wrong about them. One of them is the Steelers, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. The other is the Carolina Panthers. I didn't think they would be all that good. New coach, new system, new quarterback, new defense almost all together, and no offseason, no time to prepare like you would normally want to prepare. But they've been a lot better than I thought they would be. Not a bad team, I didn't think. I didn't think a very good team, maybe 6-7 wins in their first year all together. But they've moved up in the power rankings quite a bit, and I think they have a chance to move up even further, depending on how this game looks. Whether they get ramrodded by the Saints or they keep it close or potentially win. No Michael Thomas. Saints are having issues over there. I do think ultimately the Saints win, but not enough to cover. Touchdown is a lot to beat this team by. I like the Panthers +7 in New Orleans. Up next, the Bills -10.5 versus the Jets at the Jets. look, I'm taking a lot of road teams today, by the way. Just so happens to be that way. But minus 10.5. Listen, I said it. I won't say it again. The Jets are just a bad team. If it were 20.5, I would still probably take the Bills. Bills get their get right medicine after 2 rough weeks against 2 potential Super Bowl contenders. I think they get their get right here with the Jets, blow them out. Maybe, just maybe, they put Adam Gase out of his misery after this game. Looks like he's ready to go at any moment. But they also probably want to keep him to ensure that they get the top pick. Maybe they go get Trevor Lawrence and trade Sam Darnold for a haul. So I think they keep Adam Gase around and just let him keep stinking it up and losing it up. I think the Bills cover pretty handily, minus 10.5 at the lowly Jets. Packers minus 3.5 at the Texans. Texans don't have a defense like the Bucks, and the Packers defense isn't going to go up against a very good offense in Houston. I like the Packers minus 3.5. Aaron Rodgers is going to be pissed off and ready to front run like you wouldn't believe. I think it's a close game, but mostly in control by Green Bay. I like the Packers minus 3.5 in Houston. Now, one of the big game, if not the biggest game of the week, the Titans minus 1.5 versus the Steelers. Two of the top 3 to 5 NFL teams at a minimum. The winner can make a rightful claim to the NFL's best, or at least a rightful debate as the NFL's best. But there's a big key moment here, or a big key thing to pay attention to. And that is the real prize for the winner of this game. They will be in sole possession of the first place spot in the AFC. And that is going to be a huge prize if you can get it this year. The sole number 1 seed will be in full grasp of the winner. It's far too early to say that they're going to be able to hold on to it because they would still only be a game up on teams like Kansas City. Obviously, the loser of this game, they'd still only be a game up on them. The Ravens, etc. But those are the teams that are going to be fighting for the 1 seed. The Ravens, Steelers, Titans, the Chiefs. I'm trying to think. Potentially the Bills, just right now as a record, they would be fighting for, although they're now 2 games behind. So this is a very important game. It is not to be overlooked that is an important piece because it is not very. I mean, the Chiefs aren't going to go 10-6, right? You're going to need to win 12, 13, maybe even 14 games in order to secure the 1 seed. And you're going up against a team, in both cases, obviously, because both teams are undefeated. You're going up against an undefeated opponent, which means they're probably going to be in the hunt. Even if they lose this game, they're probably going to be in the hunt as the season progresses. It is important to secure every matchup that you can. Titans are at home. And especially if the fan situation is going to be any different, say in the playoffs, maybe they go to half capacity, 3/4, or potentially even full stadiums. Who knows? I don't know what the outlook on that is. Here's the thing. If you are a football fan, you want to see a real football game, this is the one to watch. You got 2 teams with a little bit of history, obviously not to the level of Steelers and Ravens, but still a little bit of history, a little bit of bad blood, and 2 teams with nasty attitudes, 2 teams with grinding, nasty in a good way head coaches. Mike Tomlin, one of my favorite coaches in the league. Obviously, Mike Vrabel, my favorite coach because he coaches my favorite team. He's one of the really good coaches in the league, getting a lot more recognition now. 2 well-disciplined teams, not 2 teams that you're going to see committing a ton of penalties. Obviously, the Steelers' defense, potentially number 1 in the NFL. I think they're 2 behind the Bucks, but regardless, number 2, okay, fine. And the Titans, who defensively, they're getting a little bit better. Offensively, top 2, top 3, at worst, top 5 offense in the league. That is something to behold, and we're going to see it on Sunday. Like I said, number 1 seed is up for grasp. I like the Titans to win minus 1.5 versus the Steelers. Wouldn't be shocked if it didn't go that way. But like I said, this is going to be a classic matchup. Put your chin straps on and buckle them up because this is going to be a fun one. Bucks -4 at the Raiders. I like the Bucks -4 here. Raiders, they get a chance to put people on notice. They've been asking for respect. Derek Carr asking for respect on his name. This is a chance to lay it down right here. You got the Bucks coming in after smoking the Packers last week, potentially the best team in all of football, and they're coming to your house, your brand new house, and everyone's talking about all the Raiders. Derek Carr, is he going to get back to his MVP form? He's playing a lot better. Raiders in contention for the division and in contention for a playoff spot. Can they beat the Bucks at home? No way, no how. It ain't happening versus the Bucks. The defense is too good. The Raiders are going to need Derek Carr to win this game, not just, steer them to a win. And I don't see that happening. I've got no confidence he could do so. Yeah, sure, they beat the Chiefs. Okay, that's fine. Early in the season, this is a divisional opponent. I don't think that that's in any way indicative of what this Raiders team is going to be throughout the season. The Bucks are hitting midseason form, and the Raiders are really just in the way. I think they rolled the Raiders this week, not so much like they rolled the Packers, but rolled nonetheless. And we just learned today, actually, right before recording this, that Antonio Brown won't be available this week, but obviously will be available in Week 9 once he serves the suspension. And the Bucks signed him to a one-year deal. The rich get richer with Antonio Brown, and they are just getting things started down in Tampa. I like the Bucks -4. Chargers -7.5 versus the Jaguars. I don't love it. 7.5 points is a lot, even for a good team, because they have a young rookie quarterback who you can say what you want about, this Jaguars team and all that, but this is still a rookie, and there's a lot of things that he simply doesn't know about the NFL just yet. Is he good enough to beat the Jaguars? Of course, but 7.5 is still a lot of points to give up for a rookie. He could easily make a mistake, misread a coverage, throw an interception, maybe doesn't feel the pressure, gets a strip sack, and the Jaguars get an easy touchdown late or something like that. You never know with the rookie quarterback. I don't love it, but because the Jaguars are such a bad football team, I'm going to go with it. Chargers -7.5. I think the Jaguars have all but given up on the season, along with the Jets. Patriots -2.5 versus the 49ers. I like the Patriots here to cover. Listen, I know the Titans came out and absolutely manhandled the Bills off of the 2-week issue with COVID and not practicing and being in the facility and all that stuff. I think that was an anomaly. I don't think that's going to be the norm. And by the way, credit to the Titans organization, credit to Mike Vrabel and all of the staff for being that prepared and doing all that good stuff. But the fact remains, the chances of them pulling that off again, hey, Titans, you're going to take 2 weeks off. You're not going to be able to practice. You're not going to be able to review and talk and do all the things that you would normally do. And you're going to go out and play one of the best teams in your division or in your conference and absolutely destroy them by 30 points. That's just not possible. I shouldn't say possible because we saw it happen, but it's just not feasible. It's just not likely. And that's what happened to the Patriots last week. Now, Broncos, bad football team, but again, when you don't have time to prepare, especially when you're preparing at the level that they do in New England, it's not that I'm giving them a total pass on what happened, but I just got to give it a little bit of a pass, despite what happened with Tennessee. Again, I think that's an anomaly. 49ers still banged up. They still have a bad quarterback in Jimmy G. Yeah, I said it. I've always said it. He's not a very good quarterback. I shouldn't say bad. He's decent enough. You get caught up in these quarterback contracts, and does Dak deserve what he's asking for and all this? Listen, do they deserve it? Of course they deserve it. In terms of what they do for the organizations and all that good stuff. But like, if you're asking me based on their level of play, do they deserve that money? I don't believe so. And Jimmy G, I think, is coming to roost for the 49ers. I don't believe he was worth the money that he got. They tried to get Tom Brady. Rumor mill says that may be trying to get Matt Ryan from Atlanta. So I think the Patriots win this -2.5 cover on a late field goal. maybe even a late touchdown in order to beat the 49ers. But I do think Bill Belichick, the best coach of football, finds a way to get this done. Chiefs -7.5 at the Broncos. Um, it's hard to not go with the Chiefs in any situation, but they haven't been blowing teams out this year, which 7.5 is not a blowout per se, but 8 points is a pretty convincing win. Um, it's convincing enough, I should say. The Broncos quarterback is back, but he isn't playing great, missing his best receiver, still missing some guys on the defensive side of the football. This is another one that I don't love because Drew Lock and the Broncos, they're not a bad team in that they have players and they are well coached, they're well disciplined. They're not like some rinky-dink football team. And so 7.5 points is a lot, especially with the Chiefs this year not being what they were last year offensively. But I got to go with the Chiefs -7.5 on the road at Denver. Patrick Mahomes, too good. Andy Reid, second best coach in football behind Bill Belichick. I think they ultimately get it done, but closer than most people may think. Seahawks -3 at the Cardinals. Can't argue against going with Russell Wilson. I don't know how you do so. They were in the running as well for Antonio Brown. Obviously, that didn't fall through the way they wanted it to, but it doesn't matter because their offense is just as explosive as anyone else's in the NFL. I like the Cardinals, but Kyler Murray is not Russell Wilson. Can you keep it close against such a bad defense? I think the Seattle defense actually steps up a bit this week. Jamal Adams should be coming back. I think they get a little bit of boost from that, and I think they handle the Cardinals pretty handily. I love the Seahawks -3 here. And finally, the Bears +6 at the Rams. I love the Bears here. I think the Bears they're much maligned by a lot of people. I think because Trubisky and Foles are their quarterback, the Bears are a good football team. People don't want to give them their respect. I had them pretty high heading into the season. They are 5-1 now, and people think they are the worst team in all of football. Are they potentially the worst bad team or the worst good team? Sure. They may just be a very good bad team, as people may like to say. But it's hard to ignore 5-1. Their defense is legit. Nick Foles can be come and go, hit or miss, hot and cold. But when he's on, he's on. And you got a guy who's not afraid of the moment. I think the Rams are a little bit struggling right now. Got off to a decent start and have kind of fizzled out since then. I went into the season not as high on the Rams. They caught my eye for a moment and I was ready to turn around. And then they had a few kind of dud games and I kind of came back down on the Rams. And so that's why I stand there. Bears +6, even though it's on the road, +6 is a lot for this good team. I love the Bears there. And those are the picks for week 7. Go out there and make some money. Like I said, we're hitting at 64% on the year. So you guys go out and make some money. If you've been using these picks, you should have made some money already. And now we're going to make you some more money because we are about to talk about a little bit of Draftkings, some sleepers, some cheap stacks you can play, even got a defense that you can potentially run with. So let's get to it. All right, so for DraftKings this week, we'll make this short. A lot of people are going to be on Kyler Murray going up against the Seattle defense. Not very good. They are getting Jamal Adams back, and I think that will help out a little bit, although they were bad when they had Jamal Adams. I think they're still going to be somewhat pretty decimated, but it should help. Between that and the fact that it's going to be such high ownership numbers for Kyler Murray, I would probably go with someone else. But for the most, I think for the safest play in terms of getting value, getting points for the position, it's hard to argue against going with Kyler Murray. He's only 7.1K versus Seattle's defense, whereas Russell Wilson actually is 8K against a okay Cardinals defense, and then you got a few other guys around the league you can go with. But for 7,000, basically, Kyler Murray against his defense, Even though it's going to be high ownership percentages, it's hard to ignore. A cheap stack that you could go with, and it's a risky one, but it's sort of a similar situation. Kyle Allen going up against the Cowboys defense, stacking him up with Terry McLaurin, maybe even Gibson or Logan Thomas potentially. You can go with a cheap three-way stack there. But Kyle Allen, Terry McLaurin, a really cheap stack versus a really bad defense. Maybe for the value versus the production, you could get 20 to 25 points out of Kyle Allen, maybe 18 to 20 out of Terry McLaurin. And if they have a really good day versus a really bad team, you could just get really lucky and they both go for, say, 30 against a bad football team. We've seen Kyle Allen have some good games against really bad teams last year with the Panthers. No reason to say that he couldn't do it against the Cowboys and their terrible defense. Another cheap-ish stack would be, once again, Ryan Tannehill and A.J. Brown. Still pretty cheap altogether. Only costing about 12.5 thousand in Draftkings for the two of them. And even against Pittsburgh, potentially the best defense in football, it's too cheap to pass on the level of production that they've had in the past. Now, could they come out and just get rolled by the Steelers? Yeah, they could defensively. I don't think that's likely, but we saw what they did to the Browns and others. This defense, or excuse me, this offense in the Titans is much more polished, much more imposing with that dude in the backfield and Derrick Henry. Something that the Steelers are going to have to focus on. Maybe they try to shut down the run, open things up for Ryan Tannehill. The play action is obviously a big factor with the Titans, and so maybe they can use that to their advantage. But for the price, for the production level, no Corey Davis, I don't think. Adam Humphries will play, but Tannehill, A.J. Brown has been a worthy combo throughout the year so far when A.J. Brown's been healthy. And Tannehill himself has been a very, very good option at quarterback, so I love that stack, cheap-ish. Another cheap guy is Gio Bernard. No Joe Mixon. 4.5 thousand is the steal for Gio Bernard. Starting running back, probably going to get between 14 to 18 touches easily. Maybe depending on how the game goes, he sees more, 20 to 22 or something like that. A little bit of action coming out of the backfield, catching passes, something that he's really good at. Not the most efficient guy in the backfield, but for 4.5 thousand and for the volume he's going to get, he's a very, very good option for a running back. At tight end, you got a couple of guys I like this week. Anthony Firkser of the Titans. We've seen his production increase, although Michael Pruitt is going to be back. They tend to spread the ball around the tight ends. Jonnu Smith is, I think, their best tight end, but because their other three tight ends are very good, or excuse me, their other two tight ends, they have more than three, but whatever. Michael Pruitt and Anthony Firkser is a pretty good tight end. So if you're looking just for a cheap option, it's a gamble because, again, they have three really good tight ends. But maybe he sneaks in because he's going to get some looks, maybe 4 to 5 catches if you're lucky. Hopefully he gets in the end zone once or twice potentially. It is a target that Ryan Tannehill likes. And that's a stack you could go with. Tannehill, A.J. Brown, and perhaps Anthony Firkser at tight end. And then the other guy I like at tight end this week, Dalton Schultz of the Cowboys. I picked him a little bit earlier this year. I think for Andy Dalton, it's a safe option, your tight end. Instead of trying to spread the ball to all these playmakers all the time, maybe play a little bit safer, get it to a tight end. I think we can see Dalton Schultz potentially sneak into the end zone once or twice as well, have maybe 4 or 5 catches. So two really cheap, solid positions, or two cheap, solid options, I should say, for the position. Anthony Firkser and Dalton Schultz of the Cowboys. And then finally, a defense that I really like this week. After I just talked about Andy Dalton and the Cowboys and Dalton Schultz, I like Washington's defense. So maybe you don't go with Dalton Schultz. Obviously, that would go against what you're doing. But if you're looking for a defense, potentially going up against a bad offense, Andy Dalton, not as good as I thought he was going to be. Now, it was only his first outing. His first outing as the starter, I should say. He did have, I guess, about a half the first week, but that was coming in cold off the bench. First full start last week didn't go well. Maybe in his second start, he gets off to a little bit better start in the game. But you could have a potential bad matchup here with that defensive line for Washington. All of Dallas's starters on the offensive line are out. Maybe Chase Young, Sweat, and all those guys can get to the quarterback and make it a rough day for the Cowboys. So if you're looking for a cheap defense with the potential to give you at least 15 points, maybe 20 or so, depending on how bad things get, I love Washington's defense against the Cowboys for that. And folks, that will do it for this week's episode 17. Those are your picks. Those are your DraftKings tips. Stay tuned in next week. We'll be back on Monday after all the games tomorrow to talk about what we saw, to preview the Monday Night Showdown game, and talk a little bit about next week. It has been your host, Capo. I will see you all in the next episode. Take care, everybody, and peace.